What brings you here, Colonel Martinez? Another misunderstanding about federal regulations?
There is no misunderstanding, Mayor. I am here to end your career.
Corrupt mayor stole veteran benefits. What the base commander did will amaze you. The federal audit report landed on Colonel Sarah Iron Lady Martinez's desk like a cluster bomb. Its findings so devastating they made her 25 years of military service seem like basic training. Mayor Richard Blackstone had systematically stolen $2.3 million from veteran housing programs while Fort Carson families lived in substandard conditions and homeless vets died on the streets of Colorado Springs. But Blackstone had made one critical error. He'd stolen from people under the protection of a base commander who'd earned her stars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where leaving no one behind wasn't just a motto, but a sacred oath. What the corrupt politician didn't know was that Colonel Martinez had spent her career coordinating complex military operations against enemies who thought they were untouchable. Now, she was about to deploy those same skills against a domestic adversary who'd betrayed the very people who'd sacrificed everything for their country. Sometimes, the most devastating attacks come not from foreign enemies, but from the homegrown corruption that preys on those who served. Colorado Springs in 2024 existed as a study in contrast's majestic Pikes Peak, overlooking a city where military families struggled to afford housing while wealthy contractors and corrupt officials lived in luxury funded by taxpayer dollars meant for veteran services. The city's economy depended heavily on Fort Carson Peterson Space Force Base and the Air Force Academy, creating a population where nearly 40% of residents had military connections and veteran issues dominated local politics. Mayor Richard Blackstone had built his political career on a foundation of patriotic rhetoric and veteran advocacy, his campaign speeches filled with promises to honor those who served, while his private actions revealed the opposite. At 52, he possessed the polished charm of a career politician combined with the moral flexibility of someone who viewed public service as a path to personal enrichment rather than community improvement. Blackstone's corruption scheme was sophisticated and multi-layered, involving shell companies, falsified contracts, and a network of accomplices that included city council members, construction contractors, and even some nonprofit executives. The veteran housing funds were particularly attractive because federal oversight was minimal, reporting requirements were complex, and the intended beneficiaries, homeless and disabled veterans, lacked political power to challenge discrepancies. Colonel Sarah Martinez represented everything Blackstone feared about military leadership: competence, integrity, and the kind of systematic thinking that made hiding corruption nearly impossible. At 48, she'd risen through the ranks by solving complex logistical problems under pressure, coordinating multi-million-dollar operations with precision that left no room for waste or fraud. Her military career had been defined by protecting soldiers under her command, whether that meant securing supply lines in hostile territory or ensuring that families received the support they'd been promised. The transition from protecting troops overseas to protecting veterans at home felt natural and necessary, especially when corruption threatened the very people she'd sworn to defend. Fort Carson, under Martinez's command, had become a model of efficiency and accountability, with programs that supported veteran transition family services and community partnerships that actually delivered results rather than just generating favorable publicity. Her reputation for thorough investigation and decisive action had made her both respected and feared by anyone whose performance couldn't withstand scrutiny. The discovery of Blackstone's corruption came through routine federal auditing that revealed discrepancies between reported expenditures and actual services delivered. Housing projects that existed only on paper, contractors who'd been paid for work never completed, and veterans who'd been denied services they were legally entitled to receive. The pattern was clear to anyone with the expertise to recognize systematic fraud. Martinez's response to the audit findings was characteristically methodical. She assembled a team of military investigators, accountants, and legal experts to conduct a parallel investigation that would either corroborate the federal findings or reveal additional crimes that auditors might have missed. Her goal wasn't just exposing corruption, but ensuring that every stolen dollar was recovered and every responsible party was held accountable. The broader context was a nationwide pattern of corruption affecting veteran services, with similar schemes operating in cities across America, where oversight was inadequate and accountability was minimal. Martinez understood that her response to Blackstone's crimes would send a message throughout the military community about whether veteran advocacy was just empty rhetoric or backed by real consequences for those who betrayed their trust. The stakes were enormous for both leaders. Blackstone faced potential federal prosecution, political destruction, and financial ruin if his crimes were fully exposed, while Martinez risked her career and reputation by taking on a powerful political figure with connections throughout Colorado's government and business establishment. But for Martinez, the choice was simple. She'd spent her career protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and corruption that preyed on vulnerable veterans was just another enemy that needed to be defeated through superior planning, overwhelming force, and unwavering commitment to justice. The war room Colonel Martinez established in Building 1540 looked more like a Pentagon intelligence center than a typical base administrative office. Wall-mounted displays showed organizational charts mapping Blackstone's corruption network, financial flow diagrams tracking stolen funds, and timelines correlating political decisions with personal enrichment. Her staff, handpicked from military, police, intelligence, and logistics backgrounds, operated with the precision of a special operations unit preparing for a high-stakes mission. "Gentlemen and ladies," Martinez addressed her team during their first formal briefing, "we're not just investigating financial crimes. We're conducting a military operation to protect veterans who've been betrayed by the very system they trusted to support them." Her tone carried the authority of someone who'd briefed generals on combat operations, but her motivation was deeply personal. Every homeless veteran on Colorado Springs streets represented a failure that she took as a professional and moral affront. The initial intelligence gathering revealed the scope of Blackstone's operation exceeded even the federal audit's findings. Major Patricia Chen Martinez's chief investigator presented evidence of a conspiracy that included 12 city officials, 8 contractors, and 3 nonprofit executives who'd systematically diverted funds from veteran services to personal accounts over a 6-year period. "Colonel, we're looking at organized criminal enterprise disguised as municipal governance," Chen reported with the clinical precision of someone who'd investigated war crimes in Iraq. "The mayor's group has stolen approximately $2 million from programs designed to serve over 8,000 local veterans while maintaining the appearance of successful advocacy through fraudulent reporting and media manipulation. Martinez's response was swift and comprehensive. She authorized the creation of Operation Fallen Shield, a coordinated investigation that would combine military resources with federal law enforcement to build prosecutable cases against every participant in Blackstone's network. The operation's name reflected her understanding that the stolen funds represented more than money. They were resources that could have prevented veteran suicides, homelessness, and family breakups that had occurred while Blackstone enriched himself. The first phase involved intelligence collection that leveraged military surveillance capabilities in ways that civilian investigators couldn't match. Martinez's team used satellite imagery to verify construction projects, electronic intelligence to monitor communications between conspirators, and human intelligence from military families who'd been denied services to document the real-world impact of the corruption. Captain James Rodriguez, a former military police officer with a master's degree in forensic accounting, led the financial investigation that traced every stolen dollar through a labyrinth of shell companies and false invoices. His work revealed that Blackstone's corruption extended beyond veteran services to include fraudulent contracts for city infrastructure emergency services and even school programs that affected military families. Sir, the pattern is consistent across every program this administration has touched, Rodriguez reported during a briefing that lasted 4 hours and covered crimes spanning Blackstone's entire political career. They identify federal funding streams with minimal oversight, create fictional projects or services, then redirect the money through contractors who kick back significant percentages to the conspirators. Martinez's decision to coordinate with federal authorities was strategic rather than procedural. She understood that military resources could accelerate civilian investigations, while federal prosecution would ensure that corruption charges carried maximum penalties. Her calls to FBI Special Agent Lisa Walsh and U.S. Attorney David Kim established a partnership that combined military efficiency with civilian legal authority. But the most crucial aspect of Operation Fallen Shield was its focus on victim support and community healing. Martinez established a veteran advocacy center that provided immediate assistance to families who'd been denied services while creating a secure reporting system that allowed victims to document their experiences without fear of retaliation. "We're not just investigating crimes," Martinez explained to her staff during their final planning session. "We're demonstrating to every veteran in this community that their service matters, their sacrifices were meaningful, and their government won't tolerate anyone who preys on their trust." The operation was about to begin, and Blackstone had no idea that his political career was about to collide with military precision applied to the cause of justice. The first phase of Operation Fallen Shield unfolded with military precision that caught Blackstone's network completely unprepared. While the corrupt mayor continued his public appearances and press conferences about supporting veterans, Martinez's team was systematically documenting every crime, tracing every stolen dollar, and building cases that would withstand the most aggressive defense attorneys that political corruption could buy. Captain Rodriguez's financial investigation revealed the full scope of Blackstone's criminal enterprise. The Sunrise Veterans Housing Project, heavily publicized as a $1.2 million initiative to provide transitional housing for homeless veterans, existed only as a vacant lot where construction had never begun, despite full payment to contractors. The Mountain View Counseling Center, supposedly serving PTSD-affected veterans with $800,000 in federal grants, was actually an empty office building where no services had ever been provided. Colonel, we've identified 23 separate fraudulent projects over 6 years, Rodriguez reported during a briefing that revealed the systematic nature of the corruption. Every project follows the same pattern: federal funds requested and received, contracts awarded to shell companies, work never performed, money redirected to personal accounts through a network of kickbacks and false billing. The human cost of Blackstone's crimes became clear as Martinez's Victim Advocacy Center began documenting cases of veterans who died or suffered because services they'd been promised never materialized. Marine veteran James Patterson had frozen to death outside the non-existent homeless shelter his taxes had supposedly funded. Army veteran Maria Santos had committed suicide after being denied mental health services that existed only in Blackstone's fraudulent grant applications. Major Chen's intelligence operation uncovered communications between conspirators that revealed their contempt for the veterans they were supposed to serve. Recorded phone calls captured Blackstone joking about sucker soldiers who were too stupid to know they're being robbed, while text messages between contractors mocked veterans with PTSD as head cases who deserved whatever treatment they received. The evidence collection process required careful coordination between military investigators and federal law enforcement to ensure that constitutional rights were protected while maximizing the intelligence value of each operation. Martinez's team worked with FBI agents to execute simultaneous search warrants on 18 locations, seizing computers, financial records, and communications that provided comprehensive documentation of the criminal conspiracy. Blackstone's response to the investigation's early stages revealed both his arrogance and his desperation. Initially dismissing the federal interest as bureaucratic harassment, he began a media campaign portraying himself as a victim of military overreach and federal intimidation. His press conferences featured carefully selected veterans who praised his leadership, though Martinez's team quickly identified several as city employees whose testimonials had been scripted and rehearsed. The escalation intensified when Blackstone attempted to use his political connections to halt the investigation. Phone calls to Colorado's congressional delegation, appeals to the governor's office, and meetings with influential business leaders were all designed to create political pressure that would force Martinez to abandon her investigation or transfer to another assignment. Colonel Martinez is conducting a witch hunt that threatens the civilian control of government that makes America great. Blackstone declared during a press conference that was carefully choreographed to portray him as a patriotic public servant under attack by military authoritarianism. Her investigation exceeds military authority and represents exactly the kind of government overreach that our veterans fought to prevent. But Blackstone's political counterattack backfired spectacularly when Martinez's team released preliminary findings that demonstrated the scope and impact of his crimes. Press briefings featuring documented evidence, victim testimonials, and expert analysis shifted public opinion from skepticism about military involvement to outrage about corruption that had betrayed the community's most vulnerable residents. The mayor's attempts at damage control became increasingly desperate as more evidence emerged. His lawyers filed injunctions attempting to halt the investigation, while his allies on the city council proposed resolutions condemning federal interference in local governance. Every legal maneuver and political strategy only drew more attention to crimes that were becoming impossible to deny or minimize. Martinez's response to the political pressure was characteristically direct and effective. During a press conference at Fort Carson, she presented evidence with the same calm professionalism she'd once used to brief Pentagon officials on combat operations, letting facts speak louder than political rhetoric. The evidence we've gathered shows systematic theft of funds designated to serve veterans and their families. Martinez stated, while standing before displays showing financial records, forged documents, and photographs of projects that existed only on paper. This isn't about politics or military overreach. It's about holding people accountable when they steal from those who've sacrificed everything for their country. The community's response was swift and decisive. Veterans organizations that had initially supported Blackstone began demanding his resignation, while military families organized protests outside City Hall that drew national media attention. The corruption scandal had become a symbol of broader issues affecting veteran care nationwide, with Martinez's investigation serving as a model for similar operations in other communities. The climax was approaching as federal prosecutors prepared indictments based on evidence that Martinez's team had developed through months of meticulous investigation. Blackstone's political career was about to collide with the reality that military precision applied to the cause of justice was a force that no amount of corruption or political influence could withstand. The darkest moment of Operation Fallen Shield arrived when Blackstone launched a vicious counterattack designed to destroy Martinez's career and credibility through character assassination and institutional sabotage. Using connections that reached into Colorado's political establishment and defense contractor networks, the corrupt mayor orchestrated a campaign that threatened not just the investigation, but Martinez's entire military career. The assault began with anonymous complaints filed against Martinez, with the Inspector General's office alleging that she had exceeded her authority, misused military resources for personal vendettas, and violated regulations governing military involvement in civilian law enforcement. The complaints were carefully crafted by expensive lawyers and supported by fabricated evidence designed to create reasonable doubt about her motivations and methods. Simultaneously, Blackstone's allies in the defense contracting community began spreading rumors about Martinez's mental health, suggesting that her aggressive pursuit of the corruption case indicated PTSD or other combat-related psychological issues that made her unfit for command. The Whisper campaign was designed to exploit stigma surrounding military mental health, while undermining confidence in her leadership capabilities. The political pressure escalated when Senator Patricia Hawkins, who had received substantial campaign contributions from Blackstone's network, requested a formal Pentagon review of Martinez's conduct. The senator's letter to the Secretary of Defense questioned whether a base commander should be permitted to investigate civilian officials regardless of the evidence of criminal activity. Colonel Martinez's actions represent a dangerous precedent of military interference in civilian governance. Senator Hawkins declared during a press conference that was coordinated with Blackstone's legal team. "If we allow military commanders to launch investigations Whenever they disagree with local political decisions, we risk undermining the civilian control of government that our Constitution requires. The institutional pressure intensified when Martinez's immediate superior, General Patricia Stevens, was ordered to conduct a preliminary investigation into the complaints against her subordinate. Stevens, a career officer who understood political realities, privately supported Martinez's investigation, but was constrained by chain of command obligations and Pentagon concerns about civilian-military relations. "Sarah, I believe in what you're doing, but the pressure from Washington is intense," Stevens explained during a private meeting that could determine Martinez's military future. "The Secretary's office is asking questions about our authority, our methods, and our objectives. If we can't demonstrate clear legal justification for every action we've taken, this investigation could end your career." The crisis deepened when several key witnesses in the corruption case began recanting their statements, claiming they had been coerced or intimidated by military investigators. The retractions were clearly orchestrated and probably purchased, but they created enough reasonable doubt to complicate prosecution while generating sympathetic media coverage for Blackstone's defense. Martinez faced the most difficult decision of her military career: abandon the investigation to protect her position and pension, or continue fighting for justice while risking everything she'd worked to achieve over 25 years of service. The choice was complicated by her responsibility to the soldiers under her command, who could suffer career consequences if their base commander was relieved for cause. The personal toll was devastating. Martinez's marriage faced strain as her husband watched death threats arrive in their mailbox, while their teenage daughter endured harassment at school from classmates whose parents supported Blackstone. The investigation that had begun as a professional duty had become a personal crusade that threatened to destroy everything she valued. The darkest moment came when Martinez was summoned to the Pentagon for a meeting with senior officials, who made clear that continued pursuit of the corruption case would result in her immediate relief from command and possible court-martial for exceeding her authority. The threat was delivered with bureaucratic politeness, but unmistakable finality. "Colonel Martinez, your service record is exemplary, and your dedication to veterans is commendable," the Deputy Secretary of Defense explained during a meeting that felt more like an interrogation than a briefing. "However, your investigation has created political complications that exceed the value of any potential prosecutions. We're offering you the opportunity to request transfer to a different assignment where your talents can be better utilized." The offer was simultaneously generous and devastating, a face-saving exit that would preserve her career while abandoning the veterans she'd sworn to protect. Martinez had 48 hours to decide whether to accept the transfer or face the consequences of defying Pentagon pressure to abandon her investigation. As she sat in her quarters that night, reviewing files of veterans who had died because services they'd been promised never materialized, Martinez understood that some battles were worth fighting regardless of personal cost. The question wasn't whether she could win against political pressure and institutional resistance. It was whether she could live with herself if she surrendered when victory was still possible. The decision would define not just her own legacy, but the message sent to every veteran who trusted that their service meant something and their sacrifices wouldn't be forgotten by those in positions to demand accountability. The transformation began when Martinez made the decision that would define the rest of her career and potentially save her investigation. Instead of accepting the Pentagon's offer of a face-saving transfer, she chose to fight back, using the same principles that had made her successful in combat: superior planning, overwhelming evidence, and the courage to take risks when the mission mattered more than personal safety. Her response was strategically brilliant and legally unassailable. Rather than continuing the investigation through military channels that could be compromised by political pressure, Martinez coordinated a massive information release that provided all evidence to federal prosecutors, congressional oversight committees, veteran advocacy organizations, and media outlets. Simultaneously, the data dump was so comprehensive and well documented that suppressing it would be impossible. The press conference Martinez held at Fort Carson on a crisp October morning was attended by over 200 journalists, veteran representatives, and military families who had been affected by Blackstone's corruption. Standing before displays that showed the scope of the criminal enterprise, she delivered a presentation that combined military briefing precision with moral authority that transcended political considerations. Today, I'm releasing evidence of systematic corruption that has stolen millions of dollars from programs designed to serve our nation's veterans. Martinez announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd briefed generals on life and death decisions. The evidence shows that Mayor Blackstone and his associates have betrayed the trust of those who sacrificed everything for their country, enriching themselves while veterans died on the streets of our community. The evidence presentation was devastating and irrefutable. Financial records showed exact amounts. Stolen recorded conversations revealed conspirators' contempt for veterans, and victim testimonials provided human faces for the statistics that documented systematic betrayal. Martinez's team had prepared materials that were accessible to reporters while providing prosecutors with everything needed for successful convictions. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations that had initially supported Blackstone demanded his immediate resignation, while military families organized protests that drew thousands of participants and national media attention. The corruption scandal had become a symbol of broader issues affecting veteran care nationwide, with Martinez's investigation serving as a model for accountability efforts in other communities. Blackstone's desperate attempts at damage control only accelerated his political destruction. His press conferences became increasingly erratic as he attempted to portray himself as a victim of military overreach, while evidence mounted that he had systematically stolen from the people he claimed to serve. His lawyers filed increasingly desperate motions that were dismissed by federal judges who found the evidence of corruption overwhelming. The federal prosecution that followed was swift and merciless. U.S. Attorney David Kim, armed with evidence that Martinez's team had meticulously prepared secured indictments against 18 defendants on charges ranging from fraud and conspiracy to civil rights violations and money laundering. The cases were so well documented that most defendants pleaded guilty rather than face trials they couldn't win. Blackstone's trial became a showcase for the kind of systematic corruption that had plagued veteran services nationwide. Prosecutor after prosecutor presented evidence that Martinez's team had developed, while victim after victim testified about services they'd been denied while Blackstone enriched himself through fraud and theft. The most powerful testimony came from Maria Santos, widow of the Army veteran, who had committed suicide after being denied mental health services that existed only in fraudulent grant applications. Her words to the jury captured the human cost of corruption that treated veterans' suffering as opportunities for profit. My husband served 3 tours in Afghanistan, survived IED blasts and firefights, only to die at home because people like Mayor Blackstone saw his pain as a way to steal money. She testified through tears that every person in the courtroom shared. He trusted that his service meant something, that his country would keep its promises. Instead, he found out that his sacrifice was just another opportunity for corruption. The verdict was unanimous and swift. Blackstone received 18 years in federal prison, while his associates received sentences ranging from 3 to 12 years, depending on their roles in the conspiracy. The total restitution ordered exceeded $6 million, ensuring that stolen funds would be recovered and returned to legitimate veteran services. But Martinez's victory extended far beyond criminal convictions. The Pentagon, faced with overwhelming evidence of her investigation's legitimacy and public support for her actions, not only rescinded the threats against her career, but commended her for exceptional service to the veteran community. Her methods became a model for other military installations dealing with civilian corruption affecting veteran services. The institutional changes that followed were comprehensive and lasting. Colorado Springs implemented new oversight procedures that required independent auditing of all veteran services, while federal legislation strengthened penalties for officials who defrauded veteran programs. Martinez's investigation had created precedent that made similar corruption schemes far more difficult to execute and easier to prosecute. The personal vindication was equally meaningful. Martinez's marriage strengthened as her family witnessed her willingness to risk everything for principles that mattered more than personal advancement. Her daughter, initially embarrassed by the controversy, became proud of a mother who had stood up to powerful criminals when others were afraid to act. 6 months after Blackstone's sentencing, Martinez was promoted to brigadier general and given expanded authority over veteran affairs throughout the western United States. Her new position allowed her to implement reforms that prevented corruption while ensuring that veteran services actually reached the people they were designed to serve. The ceremony promoting Martinez was held at Fort Carson, with veteran families, military personnel, and community leaders witnessing recognition of someone who had proven that military values, integrity, service, accountability could triumph over civilian corruption when applied with sufficient courage and determination. During her acceptance speech, Martinez reflected on the lesson that her investigation had taught about the intersection of military service and civilian responsibility. Veterans don't stop serving. When they take off the uniform, they become part of communities that must honor their sacrifice through actions rather than words. When civilian officials betray that trust, it becomes everyone's responsibility to demand accountability. The Colorado Springs that emerged from the corruption scandal was stronger and more committed to genuine veteran support. New programs funded by recovered stolen money and operated with transparent oversight provided services that actually reached veterans in need. The community had learned that supporting veterans required more than patriotic rhetoric. It demanded vigilance against those who would exploit veterans' suffering for personal gain. As Martinez stood on the reviewing stand watching troops pass in formation, she thought about the veterans whose deaths had motivated her investigation and the lives that would be saved by the reforms that followed. The corrupt mayor, who had thought he could steal from veterans with impunity, had instead created the catalyst for systematic change that would protect vulnerable veterans for generations to come. The war against corruption, like the wars she'd fought overseas, required constant vigilance and the courage to fight battles that others were afraid to engage. But victory, when it came, proved that military values could triumph over civilian corruption when applied with the same precision and determination that had made America's military the most effective fighting force in history. The Martinez Protocol became the gold standard for military-civilian cooperation in investigating corruption affecting veteran services. Her systematic approach to evidence collection, victim advocacy, and interagency coordination was adopted by installations nationwide, leading to the discovery and prosecution of similar corruption schemes in 12 other communities within 2 years of Blackstone's conviction. The immediate consequences transformed Colorado Springs into a model community for veteran services. The $6 million in recovered funds, combined with federal grants attracted by the city's new reputation for accountability, created comprehensive programs that actually delivered promised services. Homeless veteran rates dropped by 73%, while veteran suicide rates decreased by 45%, as mental health services became genuinely available rather than existing only in fraudulent paperwork. Martinez's promotion to Brigadier General came with expanded responsibility for veteran affairs coordination across the western United States. Her office became the focal point for identifying and preventing corruption while ensuring that federal veteran programs achieved their intended purposes. The success rate of veteran services in her region exceeded national averages by margins that attracted international attention from allies facing similar challenges. The legal precedents established by the Blackstone prosecution strengthened federal authority to investigate and prosecute corruption affecting veteran services. The Supreme Court's eventual review of the case upheld military commanders' authority to investigate civilian corruption when it directly affected military personnel and veterans, creating constitutional precedent that balanced civilian control with military responsibility for veteran welfare. The cultural impact extended beyond legal and institutional changes to influence American conversations about veteran care and civilian responsibility. Martinez's story became a powerful symbol of military values, applied to domestic challenges, inspiring legislation that strengthened veteran advocacy while improving oversight of programs designed to serve military families. Educational institutions began developing programs that prepared military officers for civilian oversight roles, while veteran advocacy organizations adopted Martinez's systematic approach to corruption detection and evidence development. The pipeline from military service to civilian accountability became a career path that attracted qualified candidates who combined military training with legal and investigative skills. The international recognition that followed domestic success led to consulting opportunities with allied nations struggling with similar corruption affecting their veteran populations. Martinez's methods were adapted for use in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom, creating a global network of accountability that protected veterans from systematic exploitation. The foundation Martinez established, with proceeds from her book about the investigation, provided scholarships for military families while funding corruption investigations that civilian authorities couldn't afford to pursue. Her example inspired other military leaders to view veteran advocacy as a natural extension of their service obligations rather than someone else's responsibility. The universal message resonated across all communities. Military service creates obligations that extend beyond active duty accountability, requires courage from individuals willing to risk personal advancement for principle, and corruption thrives only when good people choose comfort over confrontation. Martinez had proven that one person's commitment to justice could transform entire systems when supported by evidence determination and unwavering dedication to the values that made military service meaningful.